Do you remember that story about Joseph, like at the end of his life, when, the book of Genesis ends and where Exodus begins? Where it talks about that a new king or a new pharaoh in Egypt arose that did not know Joseph. And so, therefore, all this calamity that went on after that. Well, I find that to be very unlikely. If the events that are described in the Bible regarding Joseph were indeed true, namely that he was this character that rose to a power position, namely kind of a prime minister in the land of Egypt, would have been second in command to Pharaoh, that his whatever next Pharaoh that came after that would have not recognized Joseph or his family, as the text says, indeed, and I quote, "A new king in Egypt arose who did not know Joseph." The implication is that previous pharaohs respected Joseph's role in saving their nation, while this new ruler had no knowledge of or concern for this history. And that's where I find that to be highly unlikely. Unless several generations went after Joseph had died, that perhaps, with the passing of time. But even that, uh, reason number one, Egyptians kept incredible records and they were highly detailed of everything they did down to like the ounces of grain. So that would have been highly unlikely that a pharaoh wouldn't have had any remembrance of what Joseph did for the nation, namely saving them from famine and destruction altogether, it seems like. Number two, if indeed Joseph was like prime minister of Egypt, he would have developed a career as a politician. I mean, these people traveled all over the country. They campaigned, they'd held and were part of festivals, and it was a big deal to be a ruler in Egypt. So to me, that Joseph would have not been known by the people, or his story, if this was like a historical event, that Pharaoh, their next Pharaoh, would have not recognized that or not cared about that history, or be ignorant altogether. We're not quite sure what the text is really telling us regarding about how Pharaoh did not recognize Joseph, but we just have to take its word for it. Finally, number three, that out of the possible candidates of pharaohs that would fit this biblical chronology, according to Egyptian historians, are Amenhotep the first, Thutmose the first, and Neferhotep or Neferhotep. And as it turns out, each of those three possible candidates that would fit this chronology, they're all related. They're like father and son and father and son. This is no surprise because this was the Egyptian way. You didn't just like rise to pharaoh status. You had to be born of pharaoh. You had to be the firstborn of pharaoh. So this is like father to son, and somehow, the father's second, his right hand man, is completely irrelevant is completely forgotten. So, by way of summary, folks, I find it very unlikely that this Joseph story and what follows after, namely the Exodus, was anything historical. This is likely some sort of fable kind of story that got morphed over time, and now we're reading this. And as a former evangelical, I would read this and be like, oh, wow, yeah, this has happened. This is historical. And until next time, this has been Apostate of Mind.
They call me a god.